Usually the first crack at it is usually not very good. There's a line that I heard once upon a time and it says, if you're not embarrassed by your first product or service offering, chances are you started too late.
I can see the whole wide world with these two eyes, and I can be whoever I wanna be, 'cause it's my life.
Hi, thanks for joining us for another episode of Ask Spurrell CPA. Today, Edmonton Business Coach, we're talking about building a business takes time. Again, Edmonton Business Coach, building a business takes time. I have May here with me again. May, any plans for the summer?
A lot of trips, just so I can clear my head, and when I come back to work, I'm fresh, I'm ready to start everything and just be more ready.
Right on, that's the goal. So the quote that we have here today, talking about building a business takes time, it's a Jim Collins quote, author of 6 business books, including one of my favorite, Good to Great. So it says, somehow over the years, people have gotten the impression that Walmart was just a great idea that turned into an overnight success. But it was an outgrowth of everything we've been doing since 1945. And like most overnight successes, it was about 20 years in the making. So the statistic that I'll throw out for you in terms of building a business taking time is, according to Forbes, 65% of businesses will be around for 5 years before they're ever listed. So all the listings, we're looking at business listings, 65% of them have been around for 5 years before they get listed for sale. And 50% of those businesses for sale, they've been around for 10 years or more. And according to Entrepreneur Magazine, only 20% of all businesses that are listed for sale will actually ever sell. So you're looking at the competitiveness of trying to sell a business. Most of the listings that you're competing against, only 20% are going to sell, and most of the listings that you're competing against have been around for more than 10 years. So, and the story that we have here, business owners, they've watched too many episodes of Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, and they think that big cash out is right around the corner, 6 months after starting the business, a year after starting the business. So, mate, what are the questions you think these business owners should be asking?
Well, they should be asking, is the initial service or product offering of most businesses weak?
It usually is. Usually the first crack at it is usually not very good. There's a line that I heard once upon a time and it says, if you're not embarrassed by your first product or service offering, chances are you started too late. The first crack at it, when you first launch, it's not going to be perfect. That's just not the way it works. Chances are that your first product or service offering is not going to be that great.
And will the business owner normally have to invest additional time to make up for this?
Yeah, so usually that's how you end up keeping the customer happy. So even though the processes and the products and services aren't that great, but the business owner is simply able to invest time to make up for any of those deficiencies and maintain that level of customer satisfaction until you start to develop a product or service that can stand by itself.
Is this additional time from the owner invested scalable?
No. So eventually you can only get so big at that. The owner can only invest so much additional time to make up for the weaknesses in the service offering. There's only 168 hours in the week, so there's only so much that they can do. Eventually they have to have systems and processes that the business can deliver a high quality of service that's not dependent on the owner's time, or the business can actually only get so big.
Will it take time to develop and document repeatable processes to ensure quality?
Yeah, usually this is, people think that that's something that they can do in a couple of days or weeks or even a couple of months. And those systems and processes are going to take years. And a lot of the only way to develop the really good systems and processes, going back to your initial product service offering being, likely being weak, it takes that trial and error. It takes a putting into practice of actually trying this and getting a certain result and then trying something else and improving on it all the time. So in terms of, taking time to develop the systems and processes that the quality of your service offering can be high, it's probably going to take years of trial and error before you get it where it can stand alone at a high quality, without additional time from the business owner.
Do most initial marketing systems rely on the business owner's time spent?
Yeah, so even when we're talking about generating new business, most the mechanisms that most businesses have in place to generate new business are completely dependent on the owner's time. How much networking can they do? How much can they reach out to their existing network? Can they do any cold calling? Can they work for a reduced rate to try to ingrain themselves into a certain customer? So a lot of the things that new businesses are doing to generate business, they're not scalable. They're completely dependent on the owner putting in more time to get more clients. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the business owner is eventually going to run out of time, and those activities aren't scalable.
And how long does it take to implement a scalable marketing strategy?
Most of the effective scalable marketing strategy. So we're talking about ways to onboard and attract and onboard clients that aren't dependent on the business owner's time. Those are going to take like 6 months to a year minimum. So in order for we're looking at how we're going to sell a business, how we're going to build a business that has a significant value. It's going to take years, because even if you know exactly what to do from the start, let's say you didn't have the problems with your systems and processes, that somehow you magically got it great the first time. All of the systems that you're going to have to implement to attract customers at a scalable way, those are going to take time to implement, and likely that's going to take a year or so to implement systems where you're having a reliable stream of potential new customers that isn't coming in because the owner spent more time.
And how can cash constraints restrict growth even if you have significant demand?
Yeah, so the other thing sometimes is businesses, they'll be acquiring clients faster than they can actually finance the project. So if you have a service-based business, if you double your workload overnight, and let's say magically that you actually have the right team, that doesn't mean you have the cash in the bank to pay them. Whenever your workload gets up, in most businesses, it's the costs go up first and the income starts to come in later, whether it's 30 or 60 or 90 days. So sometimes the projects will be too big for the bank account. Especially, let's look at a construction guy, and if he has to actually complete the project and bill once a month, if he was doing $100,000 a year in projects and all of a sudden he has $1 million project, well, now that first month's cost that he has to float are more than what's in his bank account altogether. So sometimes, even if you have the work flowing in and if you have the team to do it, sometimes you actually don't have the financing to actually complete the work.
And are companies that hire outsiders for key positions to scale normally successful?
Normally, that's not the successful mechanism. A lot of, myself, other entrepreneurs, we've always gotten into that trap of saying, hey, when I get to this position, I can hire someone, version 2.0 of myself, or just someone who can come in and lead the charge, so to speak. But that doesn't work very well. In Jim Collins' book, he did the analysis of, companies that had internally, of companies that actually outperformed the market over a long period of time, and 85% of those companies had internally promoted CEOs. So there's a lot of stats to back up the fact that hiring people from the outside to put them in leadership roles or key positions, that normally doesn't work. So it takes a while to actually develop that talent.
And will qualified leadership personnel normally be a limiting factor to growth?
Normally, that's going to be one of them. So even if you have the systems and processes so you can actually execute your business at a high level without leveraging the owner's time, or you actually have scalable marketing initiatives that have inbound leads happening without leveraging the owner's time. Now we have to get the leadership that actually can supervise the frontline staff, and that's going to be a limiter to growth in most circumstances. It's a lot easier to bring on frontline lower level staff than it is to bring on people in the leadership position that are actually going to supervise and lead that charge. So normally that will be one of the key factors that's going to limit growth.
Should you plan on developing leaders to take 5 years or more?
Yeah, so a lot of times there's no quick fix. You think you're going to post that ad on Indeed and someone's going to come in, but you're going to find out very quickly that they're probably not up to date on how you do things specifically in your business. By nature, businesses succeed when they have differentiation factors and they do things different from their competition. So when you bring in someone who's working for one of your competitors, they're not necessarily going to know how to execute the nuances of your business, especially in a leadership role. And there's always the risk of the congruence with culture. So you have to be looking at your frontline staff is at some point they are going to graduate into leadership positions. Eventually they're going to lead the charge. And so often that can be, depending on the different types of industry, that can be 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So you got to look at the people that are already in your organization and say, how long is it going to take for them to be ready for a leadership role? And that's going to be one of your factors on how quickly you can grow.
Will most business owners overestimate what they can accomplish in a year?
100%. Most business owners are going to drastically overestimate where their business is going to be 1 year from now. They're going to forget that it's going to take a considerable amount of time to execute services at a high level because they don't have the systems and processes in place. They're going to forget that sometimes some projects are going to be too big because they don't have the cash flow, that they're not going to generate a whole bunch of inbound leads of prospective customers without leveraging their time. These things are going to limit the growth usually in the first year.
Will most business owners underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years?
Yeah, a lot of times, although they overestimate what they can do in 1 year, they're kind of underestimating what they can do in 10 years. So you start thinking to yourself, the thing was maybe leadership was one of the constraints, and it was one of your frontline staff waiting for them to be ready. But in 5 years, you might have 2 or 3 of them ready. So although you didn't have any of them ready in a year or two, and that might have been a limiter to growth, in 4 or 5 years, now all of a sudden you have 2, 3, 4 lieutenants ready to go. So yeah, sometimes 10 years, although we're overestimating what can be done in 1 year, a lot of times we're underestimating what can be done in 10 years. So I think that's what we have here today. Thanks so much for joining us again. As always, we look forward to reading any comments that you have below so we can respond back and use your ideas for future videos. And always, please hit the like and subscribe button so we can continue to deliver you tips on how to beat the odds of business. Thanks very much.